I was prepared for this, but I wasn't as emotionally ready as I thought. Disregard, disrespect, absolute refusal when it came to any kind of closeness. Everything pointed to the same thing. Either she had a romance in mind, thinking about a romance, or she was simply tired of being my wife. It's like I decided to lose her. Over the past few months, she started to find it easier to accept. What I didn't understand was why she just didn't leave. I mean, why drag it out? Just say goodbye and live your life. I didn't transfer any money because we didn't have much. We lived in a debt-free house, but only because it belonged to my grandmother, and we moved there after her death. I already saw signs back then that I didn't like, so I talked to my parents, and they agreed to put the house in their name at least for a year, just to be safe. We had our own house, a bank account, and we lived there for 6 years before Sandy one evening drank too much wine and fell asleep, leaving dozens of candles burning, one of which was too close to the curtains. The fire alarm woke her up, and she managed to escape, but by then, the entire living room was engulfed in flames. The firefighters arrived around the same time as me, getting ready to fight the fire, when I told them about the collection of weapons and all the ammunition I kept. Around that time, there were a few shots, so they retreated to a safe distance and let it burn. One of my best friends was the captain of this particular station, and he wrote that there was no clause about infidelity in the insurance policy because they paid us, leaving us a clean sum of around $30,000. It was more than I thought we would get, so we took it and moved to my grandmother's house. We still had about $20,000 left, and she would get half of that, enough to start living in a decent apartment. I would stay where I was. I did a few more things, and if we part ways, she will be very disappointed. As I said, I expected this. I just didn't expect everything to go so calmly. I worked the night shift. My hours were later than hers. It was winter, and it was quite dark in my area. I noticed her car wasn't in the garage, and the porch light wasn't on. I went in, calling her name. She didn't answer, and I found her at the vanity table, applying makeup. She was wearing an LBD, not the one I was used to, completely new, with a higher hem and a lower neckline. I watched her for a few minutes as she ignored me. "Are we going somewhere?" "No, it's me. I have an appointment." She was waiting for an explosion, but it didn't come. I just stared at her until she became nervous. "Did you hear me? I said I have an appointment. I'm meeting another man."
No.
"What?" I said no. No means no. You can meet anyone you want, sleep with anyone you want, as soon as you move out. I'll file the papers as soon as I can. But you won't do this while we live under the same roof. Why don't you pack a few things and stay somewhere else for a few days? Give me time to sort everything out, and then we can discuss how to divide everything. Her laughter seemed almost mocking. "I won't leave. You will. I like this house, and when it becomes mine, I'll decorate it how I like. If you prove you're a cuckold, at least I'll get a bigger share of the money when we have to sell. Do us both a favor. Move back in with your parents until this is all over."
No.
"You need to leave." "Oh, I'm planning to, in about 30 minutes. Don't come here when I'm back, or I'll call the police. I'm sure I can come up with something to get you thrown out. I heard they'll hold you for 48 hours for domestic violence. By then, I think I can change the locks and get a restraining order." She was a bit shaken when I smiled. "Whatever you think, don't do it. I'm serious, Henry. This is final. You're overstepping now. Life is tough, and then it gets tougher. And now, if you'll excuse me, I need to sort out this lipstick. This bright red has to be the perfect shade. He should complement the ring around the base of his tool. What do you think?" I just smiled and left the bedroom. I knew she didn't have the courage to ask him to take her, which meant she was planning to meet him. I walked through the garage, grabbing an aluminum baseball bat I used during the summer. For good swings, took care of her car's front and rear lights. She wouldn't be driving this car. I returned and saw her purse on the counter. I opened it, noticing 6 packs of rubber bands when I pulled out her phone. Not wanting to tidy up, I took it to the garage, removed the battery, placed it on the workbench, grabbed a hammer, and smashed it into 3 pieces. I reassembled the phone without the battery and tossed it back into her purse. I almost stuck the bobby pins in the rubber bands but stopped, thinking she might claim they were mine. She walked into the kitchen as I was pouring coffee, in the tallest stilettos I'd ever seen. When she saw me, she grinned unhappily. "Out," she shouted, pointing at the door. I just smiled and sipped my coffee. She sighed. "Fine, if you want that. Look for police officers here soon. Maybe you'll want to call your dad to get money as collateral when you can leave." I took another sip of coffee. "Why bother calling the cops? I didn't threaten you, didn't raise a hand to you. All I did was refuse to let you kick me out of my house. It's not about calling the cops. You threatened me when I asked for a divorce and insulted me. I fear for my life. They always believe the woman. I'm not joking, Henry. You have about 30 minutes until I call." She paced back and forth as far as she could with those stilettos. 5 minutes later, her yelling could be heard through the door. She burst in, and her expression made me slightly nervous. "You monster! What have you done to my car? Why are you assuming I damaged your car? You shouldn't leave it parked on the street like that." For a moment, she just stared at me. "Don't play dumb. I'm just going to call him to come get me. I'll even let you see me kiss him when I leave. Don't be surprised if you don't see my head when we're gone." It was my turn to make her nervous when I chuckled. "Sure, call him. It will give us a chance to get to know each other better. I could tell him what a lunatic you can be. Hopefully, he doesn't have any long-term plans because in the end, you're proving to him that marriage vows mean nothing to you." Her voice rose a few decibels when she realized her phone wasn't working. Fuming, she stormed back in heels. "Have a nice evening," I said, smiling. "You piece of crap. You'll get what's coming, you monster." I could still hear her yelling as she walked down the street. It was almost too much when I saw her banging on the first door and not being let in. She must have repeated this half a dozen times until she realized that no one was going to help her. "Thank you, Mom." I called her when I figured it all out, and she called all the neighbors. I was well known and well liked on this street. Her, not so much. I knew she would soon come to the phone, so I sat back down and waited. It took the police about 20 minutes to answer. I didn't know it then, but she returned, staying in the shadows, waiting for the police to arrive. I knew one of the officers, a girl I graduated high school with. I invited them in, offered them a cup of coffee. They seemed nervous. "Let me guess. You're here about a domestic disturbance call. See broken furniture? See scratches on the door frames, torn clothing?" They nodded. "So why do you think there was any disturbance?" "She said you threatened her, Henry. Said you were going to ruin her life when she told you she was leaving." "I'm sorry, Henry, but the law is clear. We have to arrest you." God, this sounds serious. How serious is making false accusations? The male officer spoke up first. "If you have any evidence of this, now would be the time to show us." So I showed them a video taken with a mobile phone camera. Both officers frowned. "Well then, that gives you a lot of options, Henry. Giving false testimony isn't in your hands, it depends on us. However, you can use the video to get a restraining order. You can clearly hear her saying, 'You'll get yours,' a clear threat if we've ever heard one. Looks like you guys don't need to be in close proximity to each other right now. You can file the application tomorrow and use our names as evidence. In the meantime, if you have any way to secure the house so she can't return, that might be a good idea. If she does come back, give us a call. And Henry, I remember how sweet you can be when someone wrongs you. So let's not go there, okay? Let this go to court and be done with. Do you hear what I'm saying?" "Yes, ma'am, Sergeant." Sweet cheeks. "Oops, sorry. I know no one has called you that since middle school, especially since you started carrying a gun. Old habits, you know? You can't hide it under this uniform. You're still a world-class beauty from behind. Whoever is in your life right now is lucky, Heather." She blushed and left. It seems I suddenly have the ability to annoy any woman I come into contact with. The guy grinned. "Sweet cheeks, huh? You're right. She's a world-class beauty from behind. But no one will see that now. She just went through a terrible divorce. You're not the only one with a spouse who wants to date. Please don't make us come back tonight." They didn't need to come back. While I was talking to the police, my loving wife slipped into the garage with a brilliant idea to take my car. The downside of this plan was that she had left her keys on the kitchen table and couldn't get in with the police. And then she saw them. I always kept a set of monster keys on the workbench. That's what she called it when she saw it for the first time. It was an old but in perfect condition, full-size four-wheel drive suburban car from 1989. I think you could fit both of our other cars in it. We only used it when I needed to tow something with my trailer, towed a friend's pontoon for fishing 2 or 3 times in the summer, and as a snowmobile. If you were attentive, you would never get stuck. What she didn't account for was that I disconnected the garage opener chain, just in case this happened, and to not let her in. She started the beast. The sound was incredibly loud in the small space. Hit the garage opener button, and waited until she thought it had risen, then released the clutch, thinking to leave as quickly as possible. She should have turned on the light, otherwise, she would have seen that the garage wasn't opening. The garage door couldn't compare to the power of the 454 or the pull of the beast's low gear. She flew backward on the sound of scraping sheet metal, right into the front of the police car. She had enough momentum to push the car back several feet, causing significant damage to the front. Heather reached for the car door as the beast burst out of the garage. Another 5 seconds, and everything could have ended very badly. Her partner wasn't as lucky. He had opened the door and was about to get in when she crashed into the patrol car, knocking the door down about 10 feet down the driveway. Heather had red hair, and I knew well that her personality matched her hair. While I rushed upstairs to check on Officer Jones, she was pulling my loving wife out of the beast by her hair, shouting the whole time, "Get on the ground, you beast! Now!" My loving wife, by the way, Ginger, if anyone cares about her name, was significantly out of sorts and only groaning. Once they got handcuffs on her, Heather rushed to her car and turned on the radio. "Officer down. Officer down. Send help to 411 Elm Drive immediately." Officer Jones was unconscious. Most of the impact was on his face, and it was quite clear that his nose was broken. I carefully cradled his head in case of spinal injuries so that he wouldn't choke on his own blood. I must have held his head for about 20 minutes before the first ambulance arrived. 10 minutes later, it looked like a police gathering. All the on-duty officers were there. Heather went to the hospital with Officer Jones since her car was out of commission after giving her statement to the investigator and directing him to me. Ginger also got a free ride in the ambulance because she had bruises, several injuries from the airbag, and a pretty good bump. I repeated all of this 4 times before they were satisfied. Being a small town, I knew a few more police officers, including the chief, who was my friend's father. He was our baseball coach when we were in high school. Any news about Officer Jones, coach? No matter what rank he held, he would always be a coach to me. Nothing definite, Henry. However, it doesn't look too bad right now. They'll know more once they do an MRI and X-rays. I thanked him and was about to leave when he called out to me. "Just so you know, your wife seems to be okay if the accusation of everything we're charging her with can be called lovely. How can you accuse her of gross stupidity? Here are the consequences." Ginger bailed out, went to the bank, and withdrew $19,000, leaving me $1,000. She needed the money to get her parents' bail back and hire a good lawyer. I still had a restraining order in place, so we talked through our lawyers. Our first meeting was extremely unfortunate for her. My parents and my lawyer were with me because their investment was related to the case. The lawyer listed her demands. She needs a house, or at least half its value. I knew she had made a deal with a friend, a realtor, for him to buy it for her and then sell it back, using her half of the proceeds for the down payment. She knew I would never agree to sell it to her. My lawyer pulled a document out of his briefcase and handed it to her lawyer. He seemed surprised, and Ginger exclaimed, "What?" Her lawyer explained it to her. "The house belongs to his father. His name is nowhere in the documents. You cannot claim half of what doesn't belong to you." She was still boiling with anger when he stated the next demand. "My client wants all new furniture in the house. Living room, dining room, furniture from all bedrooms, a silver service set, and new kitchen appliances." My lawyer responded with new documents. Everything we bought was paid for by check, from my father's account. We would pick something out, I would drive her home, pick up Dad in his truck, he would write a check, and I would give him cash. I'm afraid all the furniture taken on rent belongs to the homeowner. None of this is public property, but he agreed to let you choose one of the bedrooms, I suppose, for nostalgia. In the end, almost everything we owned was out of her reach. I fixed her car the following weekend, bringing it to her parents' house when I found out they had left, trying to post bail for their daughter. The judge called me and my lawyer into his office during the divorce, reviewing the papers. He tried to hide a smirk but couldn't. Quite clever, young man. You cut her legs from right under her. You knew this was going to happen, didn't you? I shrugged. I didn't quite envision this scenario, but I knew it wouldn't end well. I was just defending myself. By all accounts, she owes me $9,000 of the money she took, but if she simply signs the papers, we'll be square. He grumbled. Fair enough. Returning to the courtroom, he told Ginger that everything was documented and legal, and he couldn't do anything about it, but I had agreed to let her keep all the money she took if she agreed to the divorce. If not, I would demand it back. She was furious, but she had no choice. The judge banged the gavel, and I became a free man. She had to forget about me and focus on her other problems. Filing a false statement with the police, assaulting an officer in a car. She got lucky and ended up on probation for a year. I ran into her a month later at Walmart. She wanted to talk, so we ordered drinks at the cafe and sat down. It took her a minute to find her voice. Why were you so cruel to me? I could ask the same question. When did you decide to give up on our marriage? You could have just left instead of making the last few months so miserable. And what was the reason for shoving your date in my face? You lived with me long enough to know I won't just give up like that. She sat silently for a minute before speaking. I wasn't happy, and I haven't been happy for a long time. I hated when our house burned down, hated moving here, hated leaving our friends behind. Maybe that's where it all started. Looking back, I realize you're a good guy, and I should have just talked to you. That's probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard from you. I didn't want to go back home either. I liked where we lived. If you had given me even the slightest hint that you wanted to stay, we could have taken the insurance money and bought something else. Even after we moved, we could have still gone back. I think maybe that was part of it, but the truth was you wanted out. Why all the song and dance in the end? I know it wasn't solely your fault, but I blamed you for everything. In reality, I didn't care about anyone else. I just wanted to hurt you. I regret how I behaved. You were right. We should have just discussed everything and parted ways as best as possible. I stood up, concluded. Well, that was enlightening. You need to see someone, Ginger. You really messed up. I heard you're going back home, so I doubt I'll see you again. Try to live a worthy life, and if you fall for someone else, use our experience as a learning tool. I didn't say goodbye, just left. I saw her 4 years later when I returned for a friend's funeral. She looked almost the same, maybe 5 pounds heavier, with longer hair. She saw me and smiled, but we never talked. That suited me. Better to leave the past in the past. About 2 years after all that mess, I ran into Sergeant Sweet Cheeks at the shooting range. She was in jeans, and she still had a killer backside. We talked, and I learned she was engaged to Officer Jones, who had fully recovered. He got a pretty good payout from my car insurance, and they planned to use it for a down payment on a house. 18 months later, I saw her again and asked how she liked marital bliss. She snorted. Seems he didn't have as high an opinion of my backside as you did. I caught him, and the backside belonged to another man. We didn't part on good terms. I'd say I'm sorry, but I'm not. She looked surprised. And why not? Because now you're single again, I hope. I never got a snap at that sweet backside in high school. This could be my chance. And just so you know, even if it's a world-class backside, I like everything attached to it, including your brain. I heard you're a detective now. Can you use that excellent brain power to figure out what I'm thinking? She blushed slightly before laughing. If it's what you're thinking, I'll have to arrest you. Sex from behind is still illegal in 9 states. It was my turn to shine, but I smiled. Is that one of them? No, you're lucky. If you really like this excellent backside and you're ready to treat me the way I deserve, you might find that I'm willing to share what I really like with the right man. Pick me up at 7, wear a suit, and don't talk nonsense. And now shut up and act. I showed up right at 7 in my best suit. I don't know if it's genetics or training, but even as silly as I can sometimes be, I knew better than to complain about that. I didn't put her to bed until we got married, 9 months after our first date. All I can tell you is that it was worth the wait. And now she's Captain Sweet Cheeks. I can talk nonsense, but calling her Sweet Cheeks in public is not the same thing, although she likes it when I say that in the bedroom. Ginger was seeing a psychologist. I don't know if it helped or not. She got married twice, and the second husband seems to be careful. It looks like he keeps her on a pretty short leash and reminds her of me when she gets out of control, telling her that I'm not the only one who can treat her that way. It seems to help her focus, at least according to the cousin who told me about it. All I can say is it's good for her. Our daughter Kelly got married today. Our wedding gift to her was my grandmother's old house. Heather never liked it, and when her parents died, we moved into her house, a large 2-story old farmhouse. Our son Mark will inherit it when we depart this world, which I hope won't happen anytime soon. After Kelly left for her honeymoon, I surprised my Sweet Cheeks with tickets to one of those ocean cruises, a gift for our 25th wedding anniversary. She always wanted to go, and finally, I saved enough money to invite her along. 2 weeks of traveling through Europe, her dream vacation. It brought me real love and a rare shot in her back door. She says she likes it, but I think she does it just to please me, and despite my numerous flaws, being a selfish jerk doesn't seem to be one of them. So I only take what she decides to give, and I'm happy with that. It's time for me to go. Sweet Cheeks is calling me back to bed, giving me a little blue pill and a glass of water. It looks like it's going to be a very nice vacation,